we have gotten so many questions from you about the CARES Act and how it's going to impact your ability to stay in your home. Jessica, thanks for being here today. First, how is the CARES Act impacting mortgages? Like, what's supposed to be happening?
So it's definitely been a very confusing process for a lot of homeowners in recent weeks that have unfortunately been laid off or if they've been furloughed due to the coronavirus crisis because the relief options have been rapidly changing. So here's what I do know when it comes to the CARES Act. There's two main forms of relief for homeowners right now. And the first thing is that it prevents lenders from beginning any sort of foreclosure proceedings on any federally backed loans for at least 60 days from mid-March. The second big thing is that homeowners who've experienced any sort of financial hardships from this can request a forbearance for up to 180 days. And then if they still have any sort of financial strains after that, they can request another additional 6 months after that. But the bottom line is when it comes to a lot of these relief options for borrowers, it really depends on the type of loan that you do have and whether or not it's federally backed.
That is so interesting. So I know a lot of people have been contacting us because the first thing everyone did like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago was they called their banks and they called their lenders and they said like, hey, here's my situation. And I know a lot of our viewers have been hearing, this seems to be really common. Hey, you can put off paying for 3 months, but then at the end of that 3 months, you'll owe all of that money at once plus the next month's due. Talk to me about like, this just seems like so much stressful confusion between banks and the CARES Act.
Exactly. And I think that has shocked a lot of different borrowers who I've talked to. And I've talked to you about different stories that I've done as far as what they've faced through this. And I think the biggest thing is when it comes to this 90-day suspension, this isn't in the CARES Act. This was previous guidance from different regulators. Say if your loan was, for instance, if you had a loan through Wells Fargo, Chase, or Bank America, but they were servicing the loan through either, say, Freddie Mae, Fannie Mac, FHA, or VA. And this 90-day suspension actually encompasses former, say, natural disasters. If there was a hurricane, for instance, they would use 90 days because they would know whether or not someone could get into their home within those 3-month time frame. Whereas this is a very different type of crisis, right? I mean, most of us are stuck in our homes, so we know if we can get into our home. So they're starting to realize that these previous guidances that they did have don't exactly work for this type of situation because it is a completely different crisis. So I think the big thing is you really need to know who backs your loan. Is your loan directly owned by the bank or is it serviced and it's actually backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or other government entities?
So what should people do right now? Because I know they were calling their banks and now I'm sure they're like Googling CARES Act mortgage, they're watching the show. What's your advice to people like right this minute if they're anxious about their mortgage?
It's definitely a fluid situation, and you should be prepared to be on the phone for a while because there's a lot of homeowners that are looking out for different sorts of relief options. So I think the first thing is know that it might take some time to get in contact with them. But also, once you're on the phone with them, you really need to ask for specific details as far as what kind of relief options are available to you. How can you temporarily reduce those payments or suspend those payments, and also be sure to ask how long that is. So say, for instance, if it is 90 days, you would want to ask, okay, for instance, would I need to pay the 3-month lump sum on day 91, or can I do some sort of loan remodification after that, or even have another round of forbearance after that? And then I think another big thing is asking if they could waive any sort of fees associated with it. And then lastly, I think that any sort of communication that you do have with your lender, you should keep it all in writing. And any sort of phone conversations you have with them, you can send them a letter saying, hey, I talked to this representative at this time. This is what we spoke about. Ask for a confirmation number because you can't really rely on every sort of representative from the bank to actually keep a document of these things. And so it's for your best interest to keep all of it documented and even take photocopies just for your records so that if later on down the line you're talking to another representative and they want to offer you something else, you can go back to that and you can say, well, this is what I talked about from the beginning and this is what I want.